All right. Where we left off last Friday was in chapter 5, talking about directing. I had previously spoken to some things that a director will consider when choosing a play to direct. And I was speaking to, at the end of class, where directors come from. How do they evolve to this particular job title that carries with it so much weight, in the sense that they are in total and complete control of the entire production process. With all of that said, in a few moments we're going to talk about the historical evolution of the director, in the sense that the job title of director, in terms of the history of theater dating back to the 3rd century BC, is a relatively new job title in terms of the history of it. The role of a director really only began to emerge as a single individual with that title in the late 1800s. So this is a relatively new job title, though in some way or another somebody stepped forward to stage a play and to guide it and direct it toward public performance quality. Nonetheless, I had previously spoken to the fact that a lot of directors start off as actors. We see an awful lot of this, especially in terms of Hollywood film. And you do see it in live theater as well. The second way I was talking about a person becomes a director is to start at this infamous job known as a stage manager. And I left you with this thought. A play, when it is staged for a regional theater, a Broadway theater, those shows run for a relatively lengthy period of time. How can we be here for 5 minutes and you now need to get up and go out? Don't get it. But anyway, they run for a relatively lengthy period of time, sometimes in a matter of years. Who is overseeing the production on a day-to-day basis? Well, that is this person that is known as the stage manager. They are with the production from day one. They are the director's closest assistant from literally the point of the auditions and the casting process all the way through to opening night. If you turn around and you look behind you, you'll see a glass window that's relatively lengthy in the rear of the theater. That, for this theater, is what we call the control booth. That is where, when a show is in production, the audio engineer, the lighting engineer, and the stage manager sit to control various aspects of the production. It gives them a bird's eye view of the action of the play so that we can handle, in particular, a visual and an oral aspect of production, lighting and sound. Well, a stage manager's job is more than just assisting a director, chasing down coffee for them. It's far more than that. And what I was getting at is this: in terms of becoming a director from the role of a stage manager, what you're doing is you're working your way up from the bottom. A stage manager will sit up there with a copy of the script that has every piece of technological information noted in it to operate the show. We, like every other theater on the planet, have an intercommunication system where they are in communication with the stagehands backstage, the lighting operator, the audio engineer. They can talk to, through a monitor system, to the dressing rooms, the makeup studio, the green room, the actors' waiting room, the backstage areas, and so on and so forth. And the point here is the stage manager has a tremendous amount of responsibility once a show opens for public performance. As I said Friday, the director is going to hang around, maybe see opening night, go backstage, pat everybody on the back, say wonderful job, then they're headed to the airport to their next directing job. They don't hang around for the next 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years and babysit the show to make sure the actors are doing what they're supposed to do every night in performance, or to make sure that the stagehands are doing what they're supposed to do every night. That's the job of the stage manager. And they sit up there and they control every aspect of the production. When actors enter, exit, when the lights change, when sound effects are played, when scene changes are made, when costume changes are made, every aspect of the operation of that show is controlled by the stage manager. And obviously then, if you are capable of doing this job well, it certainly means that you are capable of moving up to the next level, which is to serve as a director for the show. Who are you working with? And if you have the ability to control a highly technological show, what's the next move up? And of course, that's the way it is in every way of making a living. You want to move up to the next tier. And in this case, the next tier, at least in terms of theater, is the move from stage manager to director. Moving on then, the third way that people become directors is through academic training. Instead of me asking it, I'll just go ahead and tell you. What would be academic training? Obviously, even here in East Elbow Nowhere, South Carolina, Francis Marion University has a theater program, a degree program, where you get academic training in directing. There are obviously thousands of colleges and universities across this country that provide a major in theater. Our theater program here is much like many other ones across this country. You can major or specialize within the theater major in 2 areas, acting and directing, and design and technology. I run the design technology track of the theater major, which means that students are getting specific training in the design and technology of the 3 major areas, or 4 major areas of the technology of theater: lighting, sound, costuming, and scenery. In terms of the acting directing track, students take directing classes their entire 4 years here, as well as courses in directing. Our theater majors that are in that particular track of the theater major just this past fall, all of them had to take a senior level, or the ones in the design or the acting directing track, all of them had to take a senior level course in directing this past fall. And part of that class is, the majority of that class's requirement is for them to pick what is called a 1-act play. It is a play that lasts 45 minutes to an hour. It is typically performed without intermission, and they were responsible for casting it, costuming it, getting the scenery they needed, the props, the furniture, the whatever else. And they produced these things down in the Black Box Theater at the Performing Arts Center. And quite frankly, it's what we call a trial by fire. All right, you want to be a director? All right, pick a play and produce it. Let's see if you can do all of the things and supervise and take care of all of the things that you have to do to direct a play. And this is the way it is at many, many, many universities across this country. I'll also point out at this juncture is that there are also professional training schools that aren't necessarily affiliated with a college or a university. Now, what do I mean by a professional school? One of the most noted ones is a place called the Actor Studio in New York. It was founded in the late 1930s. There's this short little balding guy named James Lipton. You see him on the Bravo channel, where he does these hour-long interviews with former students from there who have made it in the industry, whether it's on Broadway or whether it's in the film industry. And this is on television on a routine basis. But you're not going to go there and get a BA or a master's degree necessarily in acting or directing or playwriting. But what you are doing is going and getting advanced study in that particular field so that you can then go out into the fair marketplace and try to make a living doing this stuff. Let me throw this at you. All right, I said there's a theater major here. A student could come out of here with an emphasis in directing for the stage. We don't handle film here. All right, their major is in theater. What would their minor be in? What would we recommend a student who wants to be a stage or film director to minor in? With obviously the idea that they would major in theater. What would their minor be in? Art? If they were a design track, they were a scenic designer or a costume designer, yeah, it would have to be art, visual art, drawing, painting. English? You would think, what are they producing? Plays, literature. But we've already made a distinction between the difference between a play and normal literature. So that would be out. What would they minor in? What would we recommend strongly they minor in? What is a play about?
History.
Pardon me?
History.
History, yeah, some plays do deal with different events of history, yeah.
Psychology.
What?
Psychology.
What'd you say?
Psychology.
Psychology. Why would you say psychology?
You gotta deal with people.
Not that you're dealing with people.
Understanding.
Yeah, you got to understand people. Otherwise, how are you going to project what is going on in a play? What is a play about? People. Why people do what they do in a given situation, the human condition. And if you don't understand what makes people tick, as we say, you're not going to understand how to direct a play. It's not that you're dealing with people. I mean, hell, you can get that in the business school. You know, how to manage personnel. But it's the literature. The plays are about humans and about why humans do what they do. So we would strongly suggest that they study psychology, or at least one of the ologies. Sociology, psychology, even anthropology. These are all studies of human nature. And that's what a play is about, human nature. Turn page 100 as we move forward here. Now, just a few moments ago, I made the statement that the role of a director is relatively new. Having this single individual in total control of a production. It's relatively new in terms of a 2,000-year history of live theater. The author speaks to this in terms of the historic evolution of the director on page 100 in this box here that has a blue background. The author of the textbook says to us, looking directly at what he says, it is sometimes argued that the theater director did not exist before 1874 when a German nobleman known as George II, or commonly referred to as the Duke of Saxe-Meiningen, began to supervise every element of productions in his theater, rehearsal, scenic elements, other aspects, which he coordinated into an integrated whole. It is true that Saxe-Meiningen was one of the first people to emerge as a separate, indispensable member of the theatrical team. Although the title may have been new, however, the function of director had always been present in one way or another, usually in the person of a playwright or an actor. What they are suggesting here is going all the way back to the ancient Greeks. The playwrights themselves directed the plays. Sophocles, Aristophanes, Euripides, They directed their own plays. And of course, the concept here was who better understood the play than the person who wrote it? And then obviously in terms of communicating that interpretation to the actors, who then in turn interpreted to the audience, who better knew than the playwright? As the centuries fly by, we see what becomes known as the actor-manager emerge by the Middle Ages through the Renaissance. And literally up to the 1900s, you had what are called actor-managers. These were the leading actor of the theater company, of the production, who also then staged the play. You see a tremendous amount of this going on in Hollywood today. Look at how many quote-unquote movie stars are starring in a film in which they are also directing it. And I spoke to a problem here and literally a conflict of interest in this term that I used the other day called the eye of the audience. How can you stand out here as a director and objectively watch a scene in rehearsal to know whether or not it is playing correctly if you are also on stage involved in it? It seems absolutely impossible to me how you can be in two places at once. But who has the power in Hollywood nowadays? Is it the director? Not on your life. And you know as well as I do, there are plenty of actors out there in Hollywood who make all kinds of ridiculous demands, have these ridiculous contracts where they're making ridiculous amounts of money because they are a fan favorite. And they may be a fan favorite, but it doesn't make them a good actor. It just makes them popular. And I don't understand how it happens, but it does. Going further, we know, for example, that the Greek playwright Aeschylus directed his own plays, and that the chorus of the Greek play would rehearse under the supervision of the leader for many weeks before performance. At various times in theater history, the leading performer of the play, or the leading performer or the playwright of the company served as director, though without the title. Skipping down quite a bit, there was a long line of actor-managers who gave strong leadership to individual theater companies and performed many of the functions of the director, although they were still not given the title. Toward the end of the 19th century, the term director came into common usage and clearly defined the role of director, or the role of the director was fully recognized. Perhaps significantly, the emergence of the director as a separate creative figure coincided with important changes that took place in society during the 19th century. Well, we're not going to get into those important changes of the 19th century, but here's the point. Here's the point. The first person to direct a play, as we know directing today, was this German nobleman known as George II, or more commonly referred to as the Duke of Saxe-Meiningen. He was the first person to direct a play as we know directing today. He wasn't an actor, he wasn't a playwright, he was simply a theater practitioner who took the responsibility and took on the various responsibilities that we now know as the responsibilities of the director. I have on the board up here a name. American actor from the 1800s, late 1800s. And the name is Edwin Booth. Does that name ring a bell in terms of American history of the 1800s? Oh my God. The name Booth means nothing in terms of the 1800s American history. The guy that killed Lincoln. The guy that killed Lincoln was John Wilkes Booth, Edwin Booth's brother. Here's your little FYI of theater and American history. John Wilkes Booth assassinated Lincoln in April of 1865. Start to say 1965. 1865. He was part of a plot as a Southerner to assassinate not just the president, the vice president, and also the Secretary of State all in the same night. The guy that was supposed to kill the vice president, the guy that was supposed to kill the Secretary of State, they chickened out and left town. Of course, what we're talking about here is Lincoln being assassinated in the Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. You go to Washington, you can go into the Ford's Theater, you can tour that theater even to this day, and you can see the blood-stained chair that Lincoln was sitting in when John Wilkes Booth walked up behind him and blew a hole in his skull. The question, too, is how in the world did John Wilkes Booth have such easy access to the president in the post-Civil War era, literally weeks after the surrender? John Wilkes Booth was an actor and was performing on a regular basis at the Ford's Theater. He wasn't in performance on this particular night, but he was able to just walk in the door. Oh, hi, Mr. Booth, come on in, here, come up and sit in the balcony and watch tonight's performance. That's the way he was treated. The story goes, here's just all FYI, he slips in behind Lincoln, blows a hole in his head, and Lincoln was in a balcony seat about 10 feet above the stage floor. John Wilkes Booth shoots him, jumps from this balcony seating area to the stage floor. When he landed, he broke his ankle. He still was able to hobble across the stage in the middle of the performance and go out a back door to an awaiting horse that he jumped on and fled to Maryland. What ensued over the next couple of weeks was the largest manhunt for a single criminal that the United States has ever seen, even up to this very moment. He was eventually found hiding with his broken ankle in a barn in Maryland, where he was supposed to have been captured so he could be taken back to Washington, D.C. and given a public hanging. But some young private in the Army said, I can make a name for myself. I'm going to go ahead and kill him myself. And he did. Then they proceeded to load Lincoln up on a train and tour him from Washington to San Francisco and back while his body was rotting. He smelled so bad by the time he got back they could barely get him in the ground quick enough. There's no little tidbit of history. But the point here is this. Edwin Booth, at this time, was considered to be the finest actor in the United States. Edwin Booth was well known for playing all of the major roles that Shakespeare had ever written. And because of the actions of his brother, he retired from the stage for almost a 10-year period. And finally, in the late 1870s, some friends of his in the theater business managed to persuade him to go back on the stage and to continue his career. Edwin Booth was what we know as an actor-manager. He was the leading actor of his theater company, and he also staged the plays. What I'm going to read for you now comes out of a book that I have where it discusses a diary written by an actress that was in his theater company by the name of Kitty Maloney. Not that that name needs to mean anything to you. But she describes the state of theater in the United States revolving around the finest actor in the country during the late 1870s and on into the 1880s. Remember, in Germany now, we've got the emergence of the Duke of Saxe-Meiningen, and all of a sudden, we're now beginning, at least in terms of Europe, to recognize that you have to have a single individual who is not the playwright, who is not an actor, guiding and directing the production. This young lady writes in her diary, and as she's talking about working with Edwin Booth and his touring theater company, she writes, 10 days proved enough to get the theater company letter perfect in Richelieu, Macbeth, Hamlet, and Othello. A few more rehearsals and our entire repertoire, which included Fool's Revenge, Brutus, Don Caesar de Bezon, New Way to Pay Old Debts, and King Lear was ready to be performed. We're looking at 10 plays they rehearsed for 2 weeks before hitting the road to tour the country and perform. Let me explain this also. During this period of time in the United States, what you saw were touring companies. They toured across the country by train, by stagecoach, by wagon. They went to places like Tombstone, Wichita, Dodge City. Most of the saloons, the larger saloons, had stages. They would come into a town and set up their sets on the stages and they would perform. These were also what we call repertory theater companies. Repertory. Which means that they would perform while in a particular town a series of plays. As much as it's hard for you folks to comprehend a world without television, obviously we're a century before this, or before television. Trust me, my cable went out 3 times last week and I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown because I couldn't watch my favorite shows on those given nights. Nonetheless, what do I mean by repertory? They would come into a town, say, on over a weekend. On Monday night, they would do one play. Tuesday night, they would do an entirely different play. Wednesday night, they would do yet a third play. Thursday night, they'd do a fourth play. Friday night, they'd do a fifth play. Saturday night, another one. Sunday night, another one. And they may stay there until they have gone through their entire repertoire. They have performed their entire repertoire of plays. And once they'd gone through them all, they would pack up and move on to the next city. The important point here is what Miss Maloney, this actress, was saying about the rehearsal period. 10 days, 10 plays. I have yet, in my 40-plus year career, I have never met a director on opening night that would not have cut off one of their arms for a few more days of rehearsal. These people are putting together 3 of the big Shakespeare plays: Macbeth, Hamlet, King Lear. Hamlet has 25,000 lines of dialogue in it. There is no way you can polish a quality performance of that play in a matter of hours, which is what she's suggesting. And what I'm getting at here is that what we think of today as the highly polished professional productions in regional theater, on Broadway, this is the state of the world of theater during this particular period of time. It seemed rather haphazard. What the Duke of Saxe-Meiningen did was to get rid of all of this. All right, there's no more star in my theater. No more stars, no more leading actors. All actors are equal and the same. You know, everybody, for example, in basketball in this day and age just ballyhoos the efforts of LeBron James in terms of the Cleveland Cavaliers. You think of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who do you think of? LeBron James. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, the last time I looked, there were 4 other guys on the floor with him at all times. Without them, he's nothing. He can't play 5 positions at once. And this is what the Duke of Saxe-Meiningen said. Okay, we're going to get rid of this star system where you think you're better than everyone else. We are now going to institute much longer rehearsal periods. We're not going to leave things to chance. We are going to solve all problems associated with producing this play. Now, when I say solving all problems associated with producing the play, let me go back to Miss Maloney's diary here for a moment. She said our rehearsal periods were always very short, only a few hours for a particular play. Costume and makeup were largely left to the actors and consequently were motivated by a desire to attract attention. Actors were responsible for their own costumes and makeup. All right? Is there a problem with this? Well, yeah, there is. All you got to do is look at the music industry of today. Why does Lady Gaga dress up like some kind of a freak of nature all the time? Every time there's an award show on television, 3 hours before, they have these shows called the red carpet show, where every actor or actress on the planet has got to get in front of a camera and go, look at how wonderful I look today. I'm wearing designer so-and-so from Paris. My gown cost $100 million. Look at this diamond here. It's worth more than the entirety of the United States. Look at me, look at me. Does that make you a good performer? No, it just means you're well dressed. Why are they doing it? How do actors make a living? By calling attention to themselves. And the bad ones are the ones that want the most attention. So that you'll be thinking of something else, oh, how great they looked the other night, while they're giving you a bad performance. She goes further to say that scenery was conventional, only slightly adapted to the needs of a given play. What these theater companies toured with was a couple of platforms, some stairs, a ramp, a couple of columns, an archway, and then they would go into a saloon or a town hall, set this stuff up on stage. All right, we'll arrange it this way for one play, we'll rearrange it for another play, we'll rearrange it yet again for a different play. What I'm about to start installing this week is the set for Always a Bridesmaid. By the end of the week, I hope to have the entirety of the shell of that set erected on that platform up there. That set was custom designed and custom built for one play. When I got it finished, you'll look at it, you'll go, that set would never work for Hamlet. It would never work for King Lear. The only show that it was designed for was this one. And here, they're using the same set for a dozen plays. And then she goes further to say that small parts and crowd scenes were practically ignored or trusted to local townsfolk, which means if they needed people to play townspeople or to have a crowd scene, they would come into town and say, you want to be in a play? We'll give you $2 to be in the show tonight. Here's a costume. Here's your 2 lines. This is when you say them. This is how you say them. This is where you're going to come on. You're good. We're ready to perform. And here comes the town drunk in going, hey, to be or not to be? Not that you're the drunk. I just came to my mind. I guess it's because I was watching a rerun of Andy Griffith at 5:30 this morning, and Otis, the town drunk, let himself into the jail. If you remember that. Mm-hmm. They don't. My point here is it was incredibly haphazardly thrown together. And the work of the Duke of Saxe-Meiningen put an end to this. Every nook, cranny, no stone was left unturned. All the props, all the costumes, the scenery, all of this was supervised so that it all looked like a custom design for one specific show. Mostly what he brought was this idea of rehearsing a play for an appropriate period of time so that the performances were polished, the characterizations were true to the way they were written in the script. We got rid of this thing of, I'm the star, everything revolves around me. I have to tell you a quick story to make this point completely clear. Many, many, many years ago, I worked with a fading Hollywood actress by the name of Gloria DeHaven. She had a pretty good reputation in Hollywood during the 1950s. When I worked with her, it was 1979 at a theater in Florida. It was a story play about a family. She played the mother, another elderly actor played the father. I don't even remember his name, but I remember Miss DeHaven, Gloria DeHaven. She had an assistant that came to every rehearsal, and I always wondered why this assistant was standing off the edge of the stage during rehearsals with a stopwatch. And what that woman was doing, her assistant was doing, was timing how much time this woman was center stage with all of the focus of the play on her. And after we had staged the entirety of the play, she went to the director, Miss DeHaven did, and said, I am not going to stand for this. The leading man gets 4 minutes and 10 seconds more time center stage than I do. And if you want me to continue playing this role, I will get no less than equal time, but I should get more time center stage with all focus on me. Now, think about these Hollywood films where the director is also the star. And how many of them are like that, where it's all about the star, who is also the director, and even sometimes the stinking screenwriter. It's a problem. The Duke of Sykes might even try to do away with all of this. Get rid of it. But that's a little bit of a historical insight into the evolution of the director. Now, where do we go? I introduced this whole sequence of information as getting a play from page to stage. All right, we've talked about where a director comes from. We talked about how we train a director. We talked about what a director will consider when choosing a play. All right, they've chosen a play. We're ready to move forward. What's the next step in the directorial process of getting a play from page to stage? What do they need to do now to start making this progress? What's the first step in getting a play from page to stage? You bought the book, you ought to pick it up every now and then and look at it. And everybody opens the book and starts flipping pages to see where to go next. I'm jumping all over in this chapter. What's the first thing a director needs to do? Pardon me? Well, I hope they read it. Otherwise, they couldn't make a judgment on whether or not they can produce it. Can we budget it? Can we cast it? Is this something with audience appeal? So we're going to assume they have read the play at this point. What's the first thing a director needs?
Performance.
Say what?
Performance.
Well, they need actors, yeah. But there's some things they got to do before they go out and have auditions. There's several things they've got to do before they even think about trying to select their actors.
In a location.
Well, they probably were hired by a theater company which has a theater. Need to find a stage manager. Yeah, well, that's part of this too, but even before that, I'm looking for some things that they've got to do prior to even casting. First thing they've got to do is a little bit of research. A little bit of research. Now, you were right when you said read the play, but let's rephrase that. They need to read the play with research in mind. Now, what kind of research are we talking about? Well, there's several things a playwright's got to research. Let's just start with some script analysis. Script analysis. They need to know what kind of play this is. They've got to, as you said, read the play and determine whether this has the characteristics of a comedy, of a tragedy, of a melodrama. You know, what genre is this? They've also got to look at it in terms of the ebb and flow of the action of the play, in terms of dramatic structure. They've got to figure out what is the exposition, what information is being passed along during the expository period. Where is the attack point? Where is the initial incident? What is the conflict of this play? What is the climax of the play? If you as a director don't understand the script itself, how are you going to convey this to the actors in rehearsal? So you have to go through this lengthy process of script analysis. Script analysis. Another thing you've got to research is the time frame in which the action of the play occurs. The time frame or the historical perspective of the play. Society changes. The way people behaved in 1870 is different than the way people behave in society in 1970, which is entirely different than the way people behave in 2017. Even to the point of the way people conduct themselves, the way they feel, they think, they believe, the way they move, the way they stand, the way they dress. During my lifetime, I've watched television, for example, go from a married couple sleeping in separate beds to at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, people that have barely met doing you know what in full view of the camera at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And you've got to understand the time frame in which the action of the play occurs. You've got to study the history of the time frame. What was the world like at that time if you're going to accurately depict the society in which that play takes place? The third thing you've got to study and research is the playwright, him or herself. Again, the point here is if you don't understand the playwright and what motivated the playwright to write this play, you're not going to understand their play at all. And that's where I'll pick up on Wednesday.